Hey y'all, and welcome to the Airport Wild Podcast, the digital resource dedicating to help answer all your airport wildlife questions. Our goal is to be your 24/7 and 365 guide and resource to help bring your airport's wildlife mitigation to a higher level. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Airport Wild Podcast. This morning we're going to be sitting back and enjoying the sunshine and the warmth of Arizona. Things are going to get pretty hot around here pretty quick. We're already into March, and it's going to get hot, and it's kind of nice to sit back and enjoy everything before everybody starts hunting for the nearest shade or the air conditioning. Yesterday, I was out and about and getting to enjoy the desert a bit. A lot of bees are buzzing, and luckily I didn't hear any rattlesnakes buzzing, but it's only a matter of time. But, yeah, spring's just right around the corner. It seems like it never left here, but I know other parts of the country haven't been so lucky. But, yeah, so with the spring, we're going to be seeing more and more birds, especially moving into the northern parts of the country. And I figured now would be a good time to talk about bird identification. We discussed this a little bit in our previous episode where we talked about carrying binoculars and having clipboards and whatnot to record data sheets on. But I wanted to go into something else we touched on. I just want to go a little bit more detail into some of the resources that everybody can use to identify a bird that they might have seen. Now, the first resource I want to go into, everybody should be familiar with these. They're pretty ubiquitous, they're pretty universal, and that's just the everyday old school bird guide. And by bird guide, I'm referring to the books, the hard copy books. There's multiple brands of these, everything from Sibley's to Peterson's, National Geographic, Crosley, etc. They're all different, but they're all the same too. They might word things differently in their breakdowns or in their table contents. They might have different terms for different varieties of birds. They might have their page layout a little bit differently. Some use photographs, actual photographs, and some use artist renditions of species. But generally, a guide is a guide is a guide. They're all pretty well the same. But I just wanted to go over a little bit on how to use one. I know they're pretty straightforward. You open it up, you find the bird. Yep, that's it. That's my bird. But I want to give you a couple of tips maybe that might help things go a little faster, maybe a little more smooth for anybody trying to utilize one of these. While I'm sitting here, I got a Sibley's in my hand, but yeah, I just want to tell you, with these books too, different manufacturers might do it differently, but for the most part, these bird books will get broken down into two types, either an Eastern orientated book or a Western orientated book. And pretty much that's going to just depend on rather where in the country you're located. If you're in the East, buy an Eastern book. If you're in the West, buy a Western book. Generally, they use the Mississippi River as the divider, but and don't get me wrong, if you're in the West, an Eastern book will get you 95% of the way there, but there are going to be some birds that will be omitted. Like if you're in Washington, and vice versa, if you're using a Western book, you might not have birds in there that you find in the Florida Keys. So having the appropriate book for the appropriate location is, appropriate. But other than that, so the species themselves will be different, but the breakdown won't be. So generally with these books, I'm just flipping through this one. Once you get past all the initial mumbo jumbo, you're going to start seeing the actual birds. You're going to start seeing the different species, and they're all going to be broken down pretty well similar. Pretty much every bird book is going to have waterfowl first. I'm not sure if because they're so readily available, everybody sees waterfowl, and they're so varied There's so many species, and they're so varied, but they're varied distinctly. Like um, like they're so varied that you can tell them apart when they're flying past you. You can tell a gadwall from a mallard from a widgeon once you got in some practice. Um, so they're very good for for people to initially try to learn on, because there's, like I said, there are so many varieties. They all hang out together, so they're really easy to compare. And I'm assuming that's why they're always first in these guides. And then the breakdown after that's going to be a little more varied. But right in the front of the book, you're pretty much going to have waterfowl followed by water birds, and these are going to be like your cormorants and your herons, and if you're in Florida, you got your anhingas. Um, just different kind of birds you're going to find around water bodies. From there, it might go into your marine birds. Like if you're in Maine, you're going to have your puffins and your razorbacks, and if you're on the West Coast, you're going to have your murres and your merlets. Um, and then you're going to have your gallinaceous, or also mostly commonly known as your upland birds, your quails, your grouse, your turkeys. Uh, then you go into raptors, and it's just going to be that pretty much those are going to be your first ones. And after that's going to break down into your old world sparrows, new world sparrows, wrens, thrushes, etc. And they can be hard to find. Like if you're in the heat of the moment, um, you might not, because they are all mixed together. Uh, so I would really recommend that, to make them easier, once you can identify at least what type of bird it is to go through your guide, and the easiest way to do it is with a set of post-it notes. Um, but you can take a set of post-its, write out the different types: waterfowl, raptors, marine birds, etc. And write each one on a post-it note, and then mark them in your book. It can really make locating birds a lot faster. Um, uh, yeah, so that's pretty much it with bird books. I mean, once you got them marked out, uh, I mean, I like having a book with me all the time. Just even if you're on a break, just sitting back under the shade someplace, you can kind of flip through them. And uh, but like I said, they can be kind of slow if you have a bird and you got to ID it now. Um, Bird books do the job, but that now part they're going to be a little slow on. Something a bit faster. Of course, nowadays everything's got to be instantaneous. Everything's faster, faster, faster. Uh, and just like everything else, when it comes to bird ID, there's an app for that. Uh, there's multiple apps out there. Um, but the one that I trust the most and use the most is the Merlin Bird Identification app. It's a free app. This thing is awesome. I think there's 3,000 bird species you can ID on this app. Uh, but another thing that's pretty cool is that, just what we were talking about, the East versus West bird books. With this app in particular, you don't have to download all 3,000 birds if you don't want to. So when you go through, you're gonna download the app. Um, and this works no matter if you have Apple or Android. It's gonna work no matter what. Um, but you can download what they call packs, and that's just these regional differences. Like if like so say I'm in Arizona, I really don't need a bunch of birds flying around in Maine. Might be happy if I fly on a trip, but for right here, all it's going to do is take up space for something I'm not going to use. So you can go through and download a regional pack. Like I have the Southwest Birds pack downloaded. Or if you're in Maine, do the New England or Northeast Birds pack. I'm actually not sure what they call it, but it's Northeast or New England, one or the other. Um, and then that'll give you specific birds for your area, and without taking up a bunch of useless space. But with the app, so there's going to be 5 steps that you're going to use, all 5 really fast steps that you're going to use to identify a bird. Um, I think in the first episode we did a little breakdown, and I kind of want to do that again. So say you're driving along a perimeter fence, you're doing your inspections, and there's this little hawk looking thing sitting on a wire. He just sitting on the fence. He's sitting on one of the outriggers on your fence. But you're not 100% sure what he is. Uh, so you can go through, and the first step is going to be your location. Put in your location, um, that where you saw this little hawk-like bird. Uh, and then you can put that in. And then what you can either have your, if you get your location services on your phone, which I think most people do, it'll always pop up as current location. Or if you don't have them on or don't want them on, you can type in what town you're in, or near, at least nearest to, and that'll bring it up just the same. Uh, and then the next step is gonna be what date you saw the bird on. So this is retro. You can go back if you saw the bird 2 months ago, and if you had a photograph of the bird, you can go through and identify it. Uh, and we're going to talk about if you have a photograph of the bird here in a minute. But the third step, see, we're already done. We're already 3 out of 5 in. Uh, is what size was the bird? And this is pretty cool in here because they go by comparisons. With if you the smallest birds, if you saw it was sparrow sized or smaller, or the largest size if it was a goose sized or bigger, and then they used American robins and American crows in the middle to give you that kind of a size scale, and then you can also pick um, in between sizes. So like for this example, we're gonna pick in between robin and crow for our little hawk-like bird. You're gonna click next. What are we gonna do? Let's do blue. So you had a blue back, and you saw a little patch of white. So you can pick up to 3 colors. I picked just two. But you can pick up to 3. Then, like we said, he was on a fence or a wire, so that's one of your options. But your other options are have like if he was soaring or flying. Was he on the ground? Was he eating at a bird feeder? And then that's it. That's your 5 steps. And then you're gonna click Find My Bird, and the first thing that pops up for me is American Kestrel, and that's exactly what I was trying to go for was a Kestrel. And then this little player thing. You have options for some more details, which will give you um, more photographs of the bird, or it'll give you a little synopsis, kind of detailing a little small little tidbit of information about the bird. And then it's also got an option for a sound recording, so you can um, learn what the bird sounds like, or if you did hear the bird make a call, you can click on that and possibly line that up, depending on if make sure the calls line up, because just like people, different birds make different noises. And then so make sure when you do select your bird, make sure you hit "This is my bird," and then it'll put in congratulations, you identified. And then for this one is American Kestrel. And then from there you can share the ID. So if you wanted to share it with your buddy or with your supervisor, your spouse, whomever, you can click share this ID, and it'll open it up, and you can your text message it or email it, etc. To whomever, and then just go back and identify another bird. Uh, and then now that we're back at the home screen, I kind of want to bring out something else. Is that this thing's got a photo ID option. So if you've got a bird you were able to photograph, whether you uh, somebody got it with an actual camera, or if you were able to use the binocular trick. With the binocular trick, I know we went over this in the first podcast, but the binocular trick being if you can get a steady pair of binoculars, like you can balance them on like the window of your truck, or if you're strong enough or steady enough, you can hand hold it. But I really recommend balancing them. But you can balance a set of binoculars and then turn out an eye cup. I mean, twist it out so it's extended. I use my binoculars with my eye cups turned in, so I have to do the step. Other folks might already have them turned out. And then you simply just open up your camera in your phone and line your lens up, well, your camera lens with your binocular lens, and look right on the barrel, and you can be able to get a photograph that way. as long as you're steady enough. And then another option you can do too, if you try to get a couple of photos, but then you can also, a trick I've learned is to set your phone on video mode. And then with that on video mode, uh, you can get, like you're not sitting there, you might not, if the bird flies away, you might not get fast enough. But if you have your phone on video, you can keep tracking it, and then uh, if the bird flies off, because I mean, if it flies away, you might get a different angle. Like if it's sitting on the wire or your fuel farm or wherever, and it's facing you, you're only going to have that frontal angle. Versus when it flies away, if it does fly away, you'll be able to see the undersides of the wings. You're going to see the back, the rump, the tail, um, or other areas that might have more coloration, and that might help you identify it down the line. Uh, like say you saw a larger, you thought it might be a red tail hawk, but you weren't quite sure, and it looked quite right. It flew away, and it's got a bright white spot right where it's on its rump, right where its body meets its tail. If it's got that bright white band, it's probably a northern harrier. So little tricks like that, little spots you might not have seen before, and you might not catch if you're trying to use your phone and you can't get your binos up fast enough to spot it before it disappears. Having your phone in video mode can just be uh, a little trick, a little handy trick to help you. Uh, so yeah, so this is all in the moment, fantastic stuff. If you wanted to learn more about the birds, or you had a photograph and you want to go in and try to find something else, or just compare birds, well, I'm pretty sure it was a red tailed, but my phone is saying it's a rough-legged hawk. What's the difference? Um, well, there's probably an app for that, but we're going to use an actual web page. You can go through and look at so in addition to the Merlin web app, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but the Merlin app is run and created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, based out of Ithaca, New York. But in addition to the app and prior to the app, they've got a web page, and that web page is allaboutbirds.org. And this is a fantastic website, wherein you can. It's not so much an identification website; it's an information site. That's why they call it All About Birds. Um, so I've got the web page pulled up here for the American Kestrel, and you got multiple tabs on here. You got overview, identification info, life history, maps, and sounds. So if you're looking at the overview, it's going to start right out. You're going to have large, high quality photographs, along with a sound file, multiple photographs. Like I'm looking at this one, it's got um, adult male and female, because two different colorations for northern varieties. Then as you scroll down, it's gonna show you the maps. This shows you the breeding grounds, the non-breeding grounds, and the year-round grounds where these birds can be seen. Along with just some basic info, like for habitat, they're found mostly around grasslands. For food, it's around small animals. They're cavity nesters. When they're hunting, they use an aerial dive method, and then for the IUCN conservation listing, they're a low concern, because these things are pretty universal. They're found everywhere, it seems like. I'm just looking at the map. They showed North America down into Central America, and the only spots where these birds can't be found is pretty much the Arctic Circle. But you get that far north, you're going to start running into other falcon species that are more adapted for up there, like the gyr falcon. Um, uh, that's going to give you like a basic description, cool facts. There's little small tidbits you might not know about the bird. But then if you were to go over to identification info, ID info, you're going to be able to compare them to similar species, and that's similar identification species. So this ranges everything from the Merlin, which is basically a giant kestrel, look very, very similar, to the sharp-shinned hawk, which is another small raptor, although they're known as an accipiter. They're tied in with like goshawks. They're not a falcon, like a kestrel is. Oh, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but kestrels are a small falcon. So Peregrine falcons, those birds are reputed to get over 200 miles an hour when they're hunting. A kestrel is their smallest cousin, and that includes everything from, so it starts at the kestrel, the small side, then goes to merlin, then the peregrine falcon, and then the gyrfalcon is the largest in North America. Off the top of my head, then versus like the sharpshin or like the accipiters. So you got sharpshins, Cooper's hawks, and goshawks, and then you got your hawks like your bootios, like your rough-legged hawks and your red-tailed hawks. But then also, these birds they're very, very small and they're pretty agile in flight. I'm talking about the kestrels and back on the kestrels. So you might get them confused with a mourning dove in flight. So they've even got mourning doves down there as similar species. And then it'll give you the four keys to ID, and that's the size, the color, the behavior, and the habitat. But the cool part is in the size, it'll give you the breakdown, both like the specific breakdown for the actual size, so it's down in inches. Like for length, it shows 8.7 to 12.2 inches. But for the stuff that's actually critical for identification, it's on that same scale. Remember we talked about the scale on the app between sparrows and goose-sized and, well, larger and smaller. These guys fall in between robin and crow. And so this does show you that. But overall, it's just a fantastic site if you just wanted to sit back and learn more about a bird you might have seen or might have heard about, might have seen it on Discovery Channel. I mean, however you found it, that's great. But it's kind of just a cool little tidbit, or a bit of information that can help you learn these birds, because it's paramount to be accurate when you're identifying these birds. Like if you think you're seeing mourning doves, like there's one mourning dove. He's funny colored, but it's a mourning dove. But it turns out to be a falcon, a kestrel. Well, that's two different birds. That's going to wind up being two different management strategies to try to mitigate that threat if they're around aviation, around aircraft. So being able to identify birds is paramount, because proper identification leads to proper management, and then proper management, leads to proper safety, and that's paramount. That's what we're looking for the most, is making sure that human health and safety is top priority. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this episode. Like I said, I just want to go over some of those identification resources. Hopefully this helps somebody. If anybody's got any information or anything you'd like to hear on a future podcast, make sure to get a hold of me. You can get a hold of me at my email, jwarner@loomakers.com. And hopefully this people will reach out and we can communicate and get as much information out there to help everybody as possible. So with that, I will leave you guys and sign off of the Airport Wild podcast. Also, make sure that if you enjoy the podcast, that you're sitting back and hitting that subscribe button, so every time we do upload something, you guys will be aware of it, and then we can keep this community growing and marching forward. So with that, for the third time, I will bid you guys adieu and have a good day.